Now we come to, I think, the point that was it, Sri Anand, you were making the point about slums, right? So now we come to this point of housing. Okay, so there's water that needs to be supplied. That's a problem. You know, the challenges we've identified. When you start looking at housing, right, you have all these urban slums coming in. So what is the biggest barrier to providing housing, right, to people? Right, so land is what's scarce, right, today, and therefore the price of land is also very high. Okay, so if you do the economics, okay, so we have these categories. We have what we call low income group, we've got middle income group, and then we have also something that's below that called the economically weaker section. All right, and we've come up with norms, right? So roughly, you know, somewhere this might be about, I can't remember exactly, but it's about 50 square meters, right, or about 400 square feet, in that neighborhood of is what we're actually promising as houses. Now, but the point is, when your price of land is so high, right, that is what drives the cost of these houses. All right, and because of that, you find that the overall cost of construction makes something highly unaffordable to this segment. So if you want to look at areas around us, Adayar, whatever, today the cost of land per construction plus construction per square foot is charitably 15,000 rupees a square foot, right? So if you're saying 15,000 rupees a square foot, and if you're going to say 300 square feet, right, that is roughly in the range of what, 45 lakhs, all right? Is that what you're talking about as affordable housing? Right, if you're saying I want to sort of resettle people in slums, right, are you expecting them to pay 45 lakhs? Doesn't really work, right? So we really need to start thinking about land economics, right, and how we sort of, so there are ways of doing it. One is to say, look, let's figure out, let's subsidize the land, right? The land is free, it's government owned land, we'll build, right? So then it comes down to the cost of construction. And if cost of construction is about 2,000 rupees a square foot, okay, then 300 square feet, that's 6 lakhs, okay, that's starting to become affordable. All right. Something else that we've tried doing is something called transferable development rights, or people around the world have been doing, TDR. Right. What's transferable development rights is essentially sort of says, look, build here and sell cheaper, and I'll give you some benefit elsewhere. Right. So benefit could be the following. There's something called a floor area ratio or a floor space index. Right. What's an FSI or an FAR? Yeah, Harsh? It's a ratio built up area to the plot area, right? So if I give you a floor area ratio of an FSI of 2, what that means is if I have a 100 square meter plot, I can build 200 square meter of built space. You build 4 stories of 50 or 3 stories of 60, whatever, 80, I mean, whatever it is, right? You can do whatever. But you've got 100 square meters of buildable space there. So here's the deal. Build for these poor people and sell it for, the cost of construction, right? And in return, in a very dense sort of central business district kind of area, I will give you a floor space index kicker. I will tell you that you alone, because you did this charitable thing for me, can build at a floor space index of 2.5 instead of 2. Which means while all your competitors are taking 100 square meter plots and building 200 square meters of built up area, you can build 250. Right? That means there's extra area that you can sell or rent or lease or whatever you want to do in prime locality where the rents and the leasing rates and all of that are high, right? So that's sort of one way of telling people to help. So I can't give the land for free, but I'll try to sort of ask you to keep your prices low and help you make your money elsewhere, right? So it's a little bit of the Robin Hood kind of syndrome, no? Take from the rich, give to. There's a little bit of a subsidy kind of model, all right? So so those are some ideas on how you work on land. Yeah, Akash. Right. Correct. So, yeah.
So, if we take that, if they are ready to give the land, like in small land, we can build a like multi-story building.
Correct.
Most of the people can visit that.
Right. So, I think that's the thing is, till we grow vertical, right? Because why do we have just one person sitting on a plot when we can actually have multiple people? So, that to some extent, again, and therefore that land cost is now divided by a number of people. Right, so I can't afford to buy the plot of land because it's too expensive, but it's not me, it's 50 of us, right, in that big multi-story apartment trying to buy this. So that brings the cost of housing down, and that's actually something that people are looking at. Problem is it now starts putting stresses on parking, right, on the sewage that's being generated, the solid waste that is being generated, the water that needs to be supplied, etc. Right, so it's one of those things that yes, you're solving the housing problem, but are you creating essentially one of those slums again, because you don't have a way in which you dispose of the waste and so on.
Yeah. And all the people living in that particular area, those same people are being resettled in the same space with lesser area. Like we can
So all of that, so the 50% allowing them to build houses, 50% allowing them to build commercial solves the economics of the housing problem. Okay, but the point is, does it create other problems in terms of, okay, now I have a commercial space, now where is the parking for that commercial space, right? What are the extra water supply requirements? So yeah, those are good ideas, right? So going vertical again is a way in which you reduce costs. Another way in which you reduce costs is you really take a relook at your construction technology. You sort of say, why should I spend 2,000, sometimes 3,000 rupees per square foot? Right? Why can't I go in for precast elements? Why can't I, use process improvements, lean construction principles, all of that, and bring my construction cost down to 1,000, 1,500 rupees, a square foot, right? So all of these are the types of levers that people are playing around with regards to housing, right? I'm going to move on, Lakshmikant, because we have a few other things I want to talk about, right? So we can we'll take some of these comments later, all right? So that's what is happening in the housing area, and of course, as one of you guys pointed out, there's the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, right, which is essentially the housing for all mission. State governments are being supported to build, right? And many states are actually going in for some of these rapid construction technologies, right? Because time is money. If I can start building and delivering houses far cheaper, then I actually save on the cost of construction, right? So those are things that are happening, all right? Right, so these are just a summary of all of these issues. There's all other kinds of things like solid waste management. Right? What do we do with all the waste that the city is generating, right? Right now we take a lot of it and dump it in landfills, and our landfills are overflowing, right? So do we have better treatment methods, right? Incineration, waste to energy, all of those kinds of things. But also, are there better ways in which we can start controlling things at the source? Can we start segregating, right? So in 2000, there's an act that came out called the Municipal Solid Waste Rules 2000, which essentially has mandated each of us to segregate at source, which means when the waste leaves our house, right, it actually becomes there's organic, there's paper, there's plastic, all of that. Other countries do it, right? So I believe the German word for that is Mülltrennen, right? Something like that. So yeah, I've lived in Germany. So yeah, but and in the US, etc. Right? When I was studying in the US, you had all of these sort of boxes out there. You put the paper here, the plastic there, all of this. So those, I think, are things that we have to really start working on. Now, there are certain parts of the city, certain parts of the country where there are primarily NGO-led movements where there's a lot of segregation that's sort of happening. Segregation then makes it very easy for you to process the waste. Right? Organic waste can be used to generate some kind of outcome. Inorganic waste, we can figure out what to do. There's a lot of construction waste now, right? Because when you demolish a building, what do you do with all of that waste? We call it construction and demolition waste, right? So can I somehow reuse that when I'm building new buildings, right? Because otherwise all that waste is going back into the landfill. So waste management is again something that we haven't really cracked, and that's again a big issue that's coming out. Okay? Yeah.
Don't you think there should be more focus on the financial structure of waste management? Because then, for example, today, when someone wants to go and just dump it, they find it more profitable than like processing it.
Correct. And so one of my students is doing a PhD on construction demolition waste, and this is one of the things that he's finding is that the economics of actually taking debris, right, processing it and going and selling it to some other contractor for use on their site doesn't work out, right? It's easier for them to just get fresh aggregate and start doing their construction, right? So either there should be a regulatory piece there which sort of forces you to incorporate recycled aggregate, or the economics are worked out in such a fashion that it's actually cheaper to reuse this rather than issuing new aggregate. So I think the economics need to be taken into concern, right? So so these are some of the issues with regards to the urban areas. Rural areas are very similar issues, right? But there are three factors that we need to keep in mind with regards to rural infrastructure, right? Three characteristics of rural areas that I think we need to keep in mind. Rural areas have very low population sizes. Okay, what that means is that the per capita cost of infrastructure is therefore going to be high, right? So if I lay an urban road, that road is connecting tons of people, right? And so one could make the argument that a lot of people are paying taxes and in return are getting this road, right? But in rural areas, the number of people that I might connect by that same length of road might be much lower. So population sizes are lower, but most importantly, population densities. Population densities are lower, right? So there's sort of related problems, right? The point is, if I lay a water main or if I build a road or whatever, right, I'm serving much fewer people in rural areas than in urban areas, and therefore the per capita costs of that infrastructure are high, and add on to the fact that the purchasing power is also low. right? Because most of these people are in rural areas, they don't make as much money, right? This makes it very difficult to financially come up with models to develop urban infrastructure, particularly market-led models, right, where private players can get involved because the economics don't work out, right? Where am I going to get the money from? So a lot of it is government-led, and even government's budgets are scarce, and generally you find that your urban bases are basically your vote banks, etc. There's more bang for the buck, if you will, if you spend on urban infrastructure. And so these are certain challenges with rural infrastructure, right? And this is again what is leading, and so it's a vicious cycle. Rural infrastructure is difficult to implement, so I implement less of it, and therefore people tend to migrate more and more to urban areas in search of better lifestyles. Another related point is that it's not so much just the infrastructure, it's the availability of employment. Right? A lot of people come to cities not because they think it's nicer to live in cities, but because there are more jobs in cities. Right? Long time ago there was something that we used to call Pura, right, providing urban amenities in rural areas, right? And essentially the idea was, let's stop urban to rural to urban migration by providing urban amenities in rural areas, so people do not see the need to come to urban cities. But that hasn't quite taken off yet, right? We still see a lot of migration. Most of the industries are set up in and around cities, etc. So I think these are sort of the issues with rural areas. So you can see the population density is very low, right, 15 times lower than urban areas, right? Therefore, the economies of scale don't really work out, and and you don't have a very good monitoring system either. So rural infrastructure has these additional issues, but it's not as if we're neglecting them, right? You guys had this whole, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, this, that, etc. There are lots of schemes for building in rural areas, and by the way, because of our national highways and this and that, in transportation, in power, etc., most villages have some amount of electrification. They are connected through roads, and so it's something that's happening, right? But maybe not to the extent that we were looking at. All right. So these are schemes. This is actually no longer a current scheme. This was the precursor. It was called the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, right? It finished a few years ago, but the idea was, let's select 60 odd cities, right? Let's first motivate those cities to get their act in order, right? So we'll get them to change to, double entry, bookkeeping, accounting standards and all of that, have them do some reforms. If they reform, they'll be eligible for some money, but we won't give them that money just because they're eligible. We'll ask them to actually compete by giving us project proposals. And as and when we receive a project proposal, if the proposal is worthy of funding, we'll give them the funding. Okay. What happens is, therefore, if I am Visakhapatnam and I'm super enthu, right, then I can get my accounting systems, etc., cleaned, enact my reforms, churn out 20 proposals before Chennai churns out a single one. Right, and therefore get all my 20 projects funded, whereas by the time Coimbatore or Chennai goes to the meeting, there might be very little money left in the pot. So it's meant to incentivize people to be aggressive with regards to urban development. The next version of that is Amrut, right? The Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transportation is sort of JNNURM version 2, smart cities, etc., Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, all of that. All right. So all of these three. In fact, these are sort of the same, just called differently. These three just celebrated their 3rd anniversary. So there's this big to-do in Lucknow, which I was invited to moderate a panel, and so we had all these people. So, and it looks like smart cities, of course, is relatively, although they started around the same time, smart cities has taken a little bit longer, but quite a few states have really jumped on the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana and the Amrut bandwagons and have used that funding to develop a lot of urban infrastructure in a wide variety of cities, right, in Madhya Pradesh, in Gujarat, right, many of these kinds of places. All right, forget JNNURM and all of this. All right. So these are stuff, but the thing I want to really come to is a question that somebody just raised, right? So all of this data you can get on the web on how these schemes work, all of that. All right, forget all of this. Let's go and rural. Okay, and you guys mentioned most of this. So this is important. Let me get to this. So this is the state of affairs, right? We are looking at urban infrastructure to start with, right? Who should implement urban infrastructure, right? One would think that the city, the government of the city should be in charge of implementing urban infrastructure. So that's a municipality or a corporation, all right? If you look at the Constitution of India, right, there are a bunch of lists. There are what's called the central list, there's what's called the state list, and there's what's called the concurrent list. Central list lists items that are to be executed by the central government. State list lists items that are to be executed by the state government. Concurrent list lists items that are to be executed by both governments simultaneously, right? The lion's share of facilities, right, that are required in a city are essentially run to some extent by the center, but to a large extent by the state government. Okay, through a series of organizations called parastatal organizations. All right, what's a parastatal? A parastatal organization is something like the Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, right, or what used to be the Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, now it's called TANGEDCO, Tamil Nadu Generation and Distribution Company, right. Look at the name, it's Tamil Nadu, right, which means it is going to actually supply across the state. That's why we call it a parastate. All right. So if I in Chennai want to do something about energy, right, so in Chennai we have a municipality, we have a corporation of Chennai, right, it's an old corporation, all of that. The corporation has a mayor, the corporation has a commissioner, right. We want to do something about energy, can we? Right, I can't, because it's the purview of the Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, Tamil Nadu Generation and Distribution Company. Okay, so I say fine, forget electricity, water, right? I need to be able to supply my citizens with water. Okay, this is TANGEDCO. Okay, so they say, okay, let's do something with regards to water. Okay, can they do anything with regards to water? No, because water is supplied by, well, by the Chennai Metro Water Sewage and Sanitation Board, which is a different organization, and the rest of Tamil Nadu by the Tamil Nadu Water and Drainage. Okay, so I say fine, I can't do water. Okay, how about stormwater drains, right, to prevent flooding? Can I do something about stormwater drains? In this case, the answer is partially yes, but part of those drains are owned by the Public Works Department, right? So when you look at what can the municipality do for urban infrastructure, the answer is very little. Most city governments, whether they are corporations or municipal governments, depending on the size, right? So beyond a certain size, you're a corporation, less than a certain size, you're a municipality, whatever. City governments have very, very few powers vested in them, right? They can take care of street lights, they take care of their garbage, that's one thing that they do. They take care of, I already said sidewalks, right? And they take care of some drainage infrastructure. That's a few activities that they can do. So for all of these other activities, right, to improve your city, housing, right? Can I build housing? No, I can't, because it's the Tamil Nadu Housing Board or the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board that's going to build the housing. Okay, and so I'm constantly at the mercy of all of these other organizations, the amount of funding that is given to them, and the strategy that they have, right? So municipal governments have been sort of mute spectators in many ways, right, to infrastructure development. Now, of course, a lot of people have a problem with this, because my point is, if I want to build infrastructure in my city, shouldn't I have a say in it, or shouldn't I have the ability to elect somebody who can do something about it, right? What's the point of electing somebody if all that person can do is come back to me and say, sorry, this year's metro water budget did not include this, or this year's public works budget did not include this, right? So what's the fun in that? So we enacted two very critical amendments. I've put the 74th here. We also have the 73rd amendment, which essentially wants to take the picture on the left and make it into the picture on the right, where the municipality actually has more roles to play. So this is a constitutional amendment. It was actually enacted, I think, in 1993 or 1994, 25 years ago, which essentially asked for powers to be devolved into state governments. Essentially say, take things away from central government, give it to the, so not state government, give it to the city government. Let the cities run their own affairs. I believe the 73rd amendment was focused on rural areas. So essentially said, devolve powers to the panchayat, which is our rural form of governments. 74th amendment was for the urban centers. But the problem is that this has, while the constitutional amendment has been executed, these powers have still not been devolved. And an often, a given reason is that the municipal governments do not have the capacity, they do not have the people, they do not have the expertise to absorb these functions. Right? We do not necessarily have the smartest and best decision makers at the municipal level. So giving them all these powers would actually make things worse. We need to centralize it, where we have a cadre of technocrats, bureaucrats, very smart, who can manage this. Yeah.
Sir, what is the change in funding structure in both the cases?
So the idea, well, that would also then be consequent, right? So essentially the idea would be, if I were to take care of water, then theoretically I should also collect the water revenue. Currently, municipal governments collect property tax, right? This is your main source of revenue. Right? And given the property tax regimes and the fact that not all of us pay property tax and this and that, there is not a whole lot of money in to actually improve the infrastructure of the city. In fact, if you look at their budgets, a large portion of the budget actually goes into manpower, paying people, right, rather than into infrastructure. So it's normally a 2/3, 1/3 kind of split. In fact, if you guys are interested, the State Finance Commission is coming out with a report September 6th, right? Less than a month from today. So keep an eye out for that, and you'll sort of find a lot of thinking of how we're thinking about our budget, right? So that's actually a very interesting and important report to read. But anyway, so we have relatively limited revenue as a city, you have very limited powers, right? And this has been one of the challenges with urban infrastructure, right? That we always therefore think of, the highways department says, okay, I will think of roads, but I will think of it as at a state level, right? Not necessarily at a city level. And what we are slowly trying to do is to move into these kinds of structures. We haven't been quite successful as doing that yet. Smart cities is another example of trying to do something similar. Right? Smart cities, again, the idea is to say, look, I will create something, create a special purpose vehicle, create a private company, right, which is owned by the city. So we have created something called Chennai Smart Cities Limited. All right. So create something that's owned by the city. The central government will put in 1,000 crores into that, and the city can then decide what to do with those 1,000 crores, right? So we're trying to sort of get city governments to be far more responsible. This is where capacity building comes in. So a lot of workshops are aimed at saying, okay, now you guys have never dealt with these kinds of sums before. You've never done these kinds of projects. Every time, so if you wanted to build a metro rail, you had a separate organization do it. If you wanted to build an airport, you went to the Airports Authority of India, right? Corporation never did anything. Okay, can we now gear you guys up to work with these mega projects? Can we gear you up in project management, finance, accounting, latest in construction technology, land acquisition methods and valuation techniques and all of that, right? So that's where capacity building comes in. So this in some ways is one of the reasons why urban and rural infrastructure find it a little bit more difficult to get going, because the urban and rural governments don't necessarily have the power, right, to actually enact their decisions, and that's what we're trying to change from a constitutional perspective, right at the start, right, the founding document of the country is sort of being changed. And of course, we've talked about specific risks in solid wastes, in housing, in water, etc., which are all things that we really need to solve, because we do need housing for everybody, some level or the other. We do need water for everyone. The lack of water not only is bad for people who don't have the water, but is also bad for the surrounding community, because then these people are likely to be fall sick more often, and that might then propagate throughout the community. Your workable workforce is actually diminishing, because people are actually out sick most of the time, and all of those kinds of things, right? And you're constantly withdrawing groundwater, so groundwater tables are going up. You have ecological damage that you're creating. All kinds of issues come with this. Okay, yeah. So you can talk about this. But that sort of in a nutshell is again the situation we find ourselves in with regards to urban and rural infrastructure, right? And of course, we have a lot of time in this class to talk about what the potential solutions can be, right? And we'll sort of do that going forward. We'll stop here.